Well, you might like to think that I only ever mess around with things that are old and moldy, but once in a while it's fun to play with something that's brand new. Welcome back to Canuck Air. As we can see from the box, this is indeed a brand new Artemis CR600W CO2 air rifle. So for those days at the range when I feel too lazy to provide my own source of pressurized air, I can just resort to CO2 cartridges and load the gun up and have fun with it. In the box, it comes with a spacer, which I'll talk about, a magazine, and a mysterious bag of O-rings without any instructions whatsoever on how to make repairs to your rifle. So, yeah, what a wonderful modern world we live in. Remember the days when every air gun came with an exploded diagram of how it all came apart? I don't see that anymore. Anyway, this is an Artemis CR600W, as I said. This one is in .22 caliber, which I rather like the idea of. I don't have very many air rifles in .22, so this is kind of fun. Yes, it is a Chinese-made gun, but what you might not be able to tell right away from it is most of the parts on it are made of metal. This is a metal receiver, aluminum, metal trigger guard and trigger, of course barrel. This is the pressure cylinder right here, which is very long. So long, in fact, that it will hold 3 cartridges. 3 CO2 cartridges fit inside here, all at once if you like, but only the one at the front end is the one that actually gets pierced and used. The other 2 are just in waiting on this particular model of the gun. Very similar to this, you can buy a Diana Trail Scout, and it also takes 3 CO2 cartridges, but it has a piercing mechanism at the front and pierces the 2 in the middle and the one at the back, and is able to use all 3 cartridges at once. That doesn't give you any more power, it just gives you a more extended shooting range, up to, say, 100 shots on all 3 cartridges without having to mess anything around. This gun, of course, will still get about 100 shots on 3 cartridges. You just have to use them one at a time. But you can store them all in the gun. Or, if you don't have 3 CO2 cartridges, you can just load 1 in and then put this spacer in its place. The cartridges, of course, go in through this front item here. I've discovered, because I have, of course, taken this out and shot it and tried it out, that it does help to have something to stick in that little hole to get that last little bite to pierce the cartridge. The gun is a single shot, normally, bolt action. Pull it back, cocks the hammer, and this little loading tray is where you drop your pellet. That is magnetically attached, a little magnet holds it in place. And of course, as you can tell, it comes out, so you can replace it with a 7-shot, in this instance, magazine. The 177 version of the gun holds a few more shots. This one only holds 7. But and that just slides into place right there, if I get it right. Doing this left-handed, there we go. And yeah, it all seems to work fairly well. Kind of fun. When the magazine is empty, you can't close the bolt, so kind of good. You don't waste any gas that way. It does come with iron sights, which are, the rear blade is metal on this. There's a couple of plastic parts in here, but otherwise it's all fairly sturdy stuff. This is the Canadian market version of the gun, and you could get this 2 different ways. There is a under 500 feet per second version, and this one is the over 500. They do rate it at 600 feet per second, and of course, yeah, you're never really going to get that unless you're shooting some really ultralight pellets or what have you. But I guess it does put out enough power that it does make it require you to have a firearms license to own one of these. But bolt action, easy to use, lots of fun. So what you don't really get is how crazy small and light this gun is. Let's see if I can get the scales underneath it here. Let's see, 0 out. In pounds, it is 4 pounds 6 ounces, which in metric 1.9 kilos, just under 2 kilos. So that's a very light gun. It almost makes you think that if they just chopped it off here and chopped it off there, they can make a pistol out of it. But of course, they do. The Diana Bandit, the Chaser are based on this action. There's a Snow Peak pistol as well. You can buy them in England and UK under the SMK brand. And they all, of course, come from the Chinese factory Snow Peak. And this one, of course, is branded Artemis, which is, where does the Artemis name come from? Well, as we know, NASA has a mission to return to the moon, calling it Artemis, because Artemis was the twin sister of Apollo. So get it? Apollo, Artemis, there you go. But the other fun, goofy thing is that Artemis was the name of the goddess under the Greek mythology. When the Romans renamed the gods and goddesses of the Greek world, Artemis became Diana. So that must be a little bit annoying to the Diana people, but there you go. Or just a clever trick. Other neat tricks about the gun is it does have a threaded muzzle. This thing spins off here, a nice little protector, and in other markets it is sold with a somewhat unique threading to this suppressor or silencer. In Canada, those things are not allowed, so this just has the protector on there. I suppose you could fit a muzzle brake or some sort of, what do you call it, balancing device, tuning device on there. Don't know if that's really necessary. But the muzzle itself, not entirely impressed with that crowning job on there, so that's one possibility for improvement on this gun. This front sight is actually a plastic part that is knocked into place on there. The other thing that's a little annoying, I find this trigger is a bit on the rattly side. When it's cocked, it's not so bad. When it's not cocked, very, very jiggly. So I have some thoughts to do, similar to what I did on the MA rifle, is install some shims in there just to tighten it up. These are little nice little touches that would take extra time at a factory and would obviously drive the cost of the gun up. This is quite affordable. I bought it, I saw it, they had a summer clearance on it. It's also possible that the distributor is getting away from the Artemis products, so I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I thought this would be a fun thing to play with, because my mind had been drifting towards the Crosman 160, a vintage rifle that was around from the 1950s to about 1970. And it was the magnum of its day. 22 caliber, used 2 CO2 cartridges, and developed pretty much 600 feet per second is what people say they do. And one of them came up for sale, and I was sort of interested in it, but the price on it kind of spiraled out of I'm not going to say reality. I mean, it was an earlier version of the gun. It didn't have the adjustable trigger. It didn't have some of the refined. Didn't have the peep sight, but it was missing a couple of parts too. And as always, with old CO2 guns, you can expect it to have leaks and needs new seals or something. So, yeah, I was willing to let that one slide because I just thought it was too expensive. This ended up costing less, and is of course a brand new gun. So, yeah, I thought this would be kind of fun to mess around with. Another possibility was to look at the Beeman QB78, another CO2 gun, which is very well respected, and yeah, a nice little thing to look at as well. But these have sort of interested me, and this one became available and on a little bit of a summer discount, so I ordered it, and well, I put it across the chronograph, and I put it across. Took it to the range and did some initial shooting with it. I tried the open sights a little bit, and then I put on the an old Tasco red dot that I had that I thought would fit on this little receiver quite nicely, because this is just an 11mm dovetail like most air guns. Doesn't have the Picatinny rail on there. Put that on there and discovered that while it did work with the single shot tray, the magazine would not go in with the scope in the way it hit it. So, but anyway, I was able to shoot it single shot. People say they actually shoot a little bit better with the single shot tray anyway. The magazine maybe maybe a bit unkind to the pellets as they go in. But we'll have a look at that and see how that goes. But I have ordered a scope for it, a fairly compact 3:9, which should suit it, because any of the larger scopes on it tend to get awfully big. As I say, this is a very short gun, very light, and front to back it measures, let's see, 90 centimeters, and which is just under 3 feet, so just under 36 inches. So that's one of the smaller air guns that I own. Oddly enough, the stock is not actually all that short. The trigger, the pull from the trigger to the butt plate is actually not that short. I've got some other guns that are shorter than that, and because of course it doesn't require any sort of cocking slot or anything in the fore end. The fore end is actually decently long, so and it's all nicely done. The checkering's not very deep, but it's there, and it certainly looks nice. So anyway, we'll have some fun with this gun. Development-wise, yes, I might improve the crown, improve the trigger. I'm not sure what else I might muck around with, but I'm going to have some fun with this. I like it. So even though this is a brand new gun to me, I got into its disassembly pretty quickly because of two reasons. One, I wanted to check everything over, make sure there was no poor machining or rough edges, make sure everything was manufactured properly and in the right place. I also wanted to understand it a bit better as to how it actually worked. I've looked over some disassembly videos that are on other YouTube sites and learned a little bit, but not everything. But after I test shot it a couple of times, I started having trouble with the bolt. Its motion was getting a bit bound up, and when I got into it a bit deeper, I discovered that the bolt has an Allen bolt on the bottom of it, and that impedes against the one on top of the hammer, and then the two of them just kind of work together like that. So yeah, what was happening was the one on the bolt was coming unscrewed a bit and was ended up being a bit rough in its channel. So I had to sort that out before I could shoot it again. Not easy to remove the bolt handle. You have to do that to get the darn thing apart. So I decide later on that I'm going to improve this system a little bit. It wasn't that easy to get out, so pretty stuck in there. The trigger parts are fairly loosely held by these pins. They aren't held in that tight. They just push out quite easily. That's the sear I just took out there. And there's a few extra things that have to happen to get this apart. That bolt handle really does have to come off. So the next step is to remove the breech block from the pressure tube, and you have to kind of get the barrel out to do that as well. Those are the two screws that I forgot to tighten up later on. I'll tell you about that later. And we get the breech block off. That's a transfer port tube, the little brass piece. And that little bolt going back and forth in there in that slot is the one that's slightly loose. It did have thread lock on it, but it wasn't quite enough to do the job. This is the valve assembly. I was just checking it over again, looking for any rough spots or things like that, making sure it was all properly lubricated. No dings and O-rings, things like that. It all checked out quite well. The other weird thing, though, is you saw me kind of feeling the metal, and use some gun cleaner here. In this case, I'm using Ballistol, but I tried quite a few different ones. And you wipe it down with a lubricant, and you get this brown guck just comes leaking out of the metal. I'm guessing this is either machining oil or maybe something left over from their bluing process, but I cleaned it and cleaned it and cleaned it. Eventually, I finally got down to what I would consider shiny blue metal, but yeah, it's an inexpensive gun at the end of the day. My solution to the bolt handle was to take a 50 line per inch checkering file and just put a nice little ring of checkering all the way around the handle. One, I thought it would just help give it a little more grip on it, but also next time I want to remove it, it'll be a little easier. It's a little rough there, but after I clean it up with some paper and some Scotch-Brite pad, it looks pretty good on the gun, as you can see here. As for the trigger looseness, my plan was to install some sort of a shim in between there, depending on what thickness I needed. My thinnest brass sheets were just way too thin. So I ended up making two oval-shaped washers out of this thicker piece, slightly thicker piece of brass. I'm thinking I could have maybe used just one piece of maybe a very thin plastic, but I made these fairly roughly because, again, I was just basically testing the concept, see how it would work out. One of my nice punches to punch a hole right through the brass, and it didn't work at all. The solution was just to simply drill a hole through it and then smooth off the edges of the hole. With them tucked inside there, with the pins all back in there, I'm quite pleased with how that worked out. The trigger ended up being much improved. Okay, so I've got the Artemis all back together again, and I'm going to put it across the chronograph, make sure everything's just fine. You see I fitted a 3 to 9 power fairly compact scope on here, and have high hopes for this to shoot fairly well at the range. Initial tests suggest it'll be pretty good. So, if the chronograph behaves itself, we'll see if we can get some decent reading on this. Oh, need to gas it up first. Okay, so I've got 7 pellets in the magazine. We'll slide it on in here. And hopefully the chronograph gods will favor us. Okay. .506. $4.99. $4.95. $4.93. $4.97. $4.90. 489. That was the last one. Okay, so this gun is supposed to do 600 feet per second, and it falls definitely far short of that. 100 feet per second doesn't sound like much, but it actually is a significant reduction in the energy it should put out. So, but yeah, that's pretty typical in today's airgun scene. A lot of claims are made for velocity, and pretty much everything you see falls far short of that. Especially if they do rate them for pellets that are alloy, which is common in 177 guns. But this one is rated for a firearms license, so it should be over 500 feet per second, and it really isn't. Well, these are the Air Arms Diablo Hunter, which are a slightly pointed version of the Diablo Field, and I'm using these because they do seem to shoot awfully well in pretty much everything I try them in. So, and when I tried this gun out with the red dot sight on it, these were also very promising. So I'm going to try 7 of these. They weigh about the same, so I can't imagine there's going to be much difference in velocity, but we'll see about consistency, just in case they fit the chamber and the bore a little bit better. So here we go. $4.99. $4.88. Maybe shooting a little too quickly. That CO2 cylinder cools down and the pressure will drop. $4.87. $4.83. $4.79. Probably is cooling down a bit. $4.76. $4.74. Pretty consistent. So, let's take it to the range and see if with the scope on there I can get that accuracy I've been dreaming of. I thought I'd show you my best target that I shot the first time I took it to the range when I was using the red dot sight, which I felt was a little less precise than what I wanted it to be. But at 10 meters I was able to use the Air Arms Diablo Hunter pellets and put them all through one ragged hole, so that certainly made me feel a lot better about the gun's potential accuracy, and I was less worried about the barrel crown, let's put it that way. So 5 shots through one hole. Excellent. So next step, buy a scope that suited the gun and take it back to the range and try my luck again at, especially longer distance, 20 yards. Here I'm using the RWS Superdome pellets. Not sure if there is a good a fit for the gun as the Air Arms ones were, but these 5 shots certainly seem to do pretty well. But I did discover, after doing this, that I had forgotten to tighten down those 2 screws on the front barrel band. So I think a bit of vibration of the barrel might have opened the groups up just a little bit. I did try one more group with the Diana Exact pellets. And this is what happens when you don't count your shots and you start to run out of CO2. Yeah. Not wanting to start up again, I called it a day and headed on home. I was happy enough with it. What I didn't show you earlier was the owner's manual that came with the gun, and you notice it's actually set up for 2 different guns, the CR600 and the PR900. PR no doubt standing for pneumatic instead of CO2. And they're essentially the same gun. One gun you fill up from a pressured air source like a scuba tank, and the one I got, you use CO2 cartridges. Obviously some of the internal parts are different, but they don't really get into that. And I forgot to mention earlier that the Seneca Dragonfly Mark II, the pump-up pneumatic air gun that got everybody excited a couple of years ago, that one's also based on this basic receiver and barrel system as well. So it's really an interesting gun, and I'm quite happy that I've got it, and going to have some fun with it, I think, in the coming years. It certainly has plenty of accuracy. And while the Canadian winters unfortunately do not favor shooting anything like this in cold weather, because CO2 performs pretty badly at cold temperatures, so I'm not going to call it a plug-and-play type thing that you'd recommend to quite anybody. It seems that it does need a bit of willingness to tinker with it a bit, take it apart, get inside it, understand how it works, especially since I had that problem with the bolt screw just coming loose and binding the bolt a bit. Fair bit of disassembly required to sort that out. Somebody else might just want to have to send it back as a warranty repair or something, and this might not be the gun for everybody, but it's certainly a good gun for me. I'm going to really enjoy this over the next few years, I think. And it doesn't hurt that it's quite pretty as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. Chronograph will be back with more interesting things, I promise. Consider subscribing.